Hello, my friends. Hello. Welcome to a very special Maundy Thursday version of the Common Communion. My name is Jonathan Brandenburg, and I get to be the pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and School in beautiful Rancho Palos Verdes, California. If you don't know what Maundy Thursday is, it is, it's the Thursday before Easter. It's sort of, I should say, Western Christianity Easter. Eastern Orthodox Christianity Easter is different, so just worthy of acknowledgement. It's the Thursday leading up to Easter. It is Maundy means commandment, and it really plays off of it's a Latin word, and it plays off the Greek word found in John 13, where Jesus tells his disciples a new commandment I give to you, love one another. Just as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And so Maundy Thursday is, I don't know, I think it's beautiful. I think it is that great setup to Good Friday. And I would even say a necessary component to understanding Easter and Good Friday very well. But for this purpose, for this purpose of common communion, my friends, I just want to talk about what does it mean to be loved. I think there's a beautiful, simple, and yet layered, infinitely complex, even though it's simple, concept around being loved. And let me start with a story. When I was just entering into my undergraduate career in Nebraska, I had not had a lot of experience with being invited over to people's houses. I just hadn't. I go over to my family's house, my other parts of my family's house. But really, for the most part, my family wasn't really invited into other households very much. It's just not where I found myself in Kansas, growing up in Kansas. And I'll never forget one of the very first times, very first weeks in undergraduate in Nebraska. I was invited over to a new friend's house. Everybody was kind of new there in college, but a new friend's house. And she had a farm just outside of, well, maybe not a farm, but some acreage. They probably would have called it some acreage, some land outside of town where the college was, where the university was. And we just roasted marshmallows and sat and talked and all this kind of stuff. But I'll never, ever forget it, because it was one of my first experiences of truly being invited into a space where I really didn't feel like there was anything to prove. I really didn't feel like there was anything to do except accept this amazingly generous hospitality that was being given to me. And I think this, through the years, the first time I went to the beautiful country of Kenya in the continent of Africa, I experienced a very similar feeling. I had been invited into many households at the time. But when I went to Kenya, for the most part, where I was in Kenya was especially relative to the United States standards, extremely poor. And I will never, ever forget coming in to this household, who is now I get to call my friend, Pastor Kefa, his household for the first time, and being overwhelmingly welcomed, and realizing how little they had, realizing how they had limited resources, we'll just say that, and yet they just laid it all out in front of us. There was teas, and there was coffees, and there was little goodies to eat, like appetizers kind of idea, and then they laid out a whole dinner for us. And this was really late at night. We got in really late at night, and they did this constantly all week we were there, and just feeling like I am not worthy. Just like all those years back in Nebraska, so in Kenya, I am not worthy by any stretch of the imagination to just receive this this hot kind of hospitality, this kind of dinner, this kind of celebration. And yet it was all done out of love. It was. And I think those that get to experience love in its many different forms get to experience this kind of hospitality that comes along with it. Love opens doors. Love opens up spaces and vulnerability, and in that vulnerability, hospitality pours forth. In that spaces, fellowship, conversation, community just naturally pours forth, my friends. And this is seen on Maundy Thursday. This is celebrated on Maundy Thursday, because one of the two biggest pieces of usually that's focused on in Maundy Thursday is either the foot washing that Jesus does with his disciples, with his followers, where right after he gave the command, love one another, as I have, just as I have loved you, so you must love one another, he washed their feet. And it's like, this is the example. Like, we're going to wash each other's feet, which absolutely happens in some spaces of hospitality. It did for me in Kenya, which was still to this day one of those otherworldly, beautiful moments where I'm also feeling deeply like unworthy of the moment. So it was very beautiful, but still something that I still process to this day. And that probably happened, oh gosh, like 10 years ago now. But anyway, and then there's other thing that happens is called usually referred to as the Last Supper, and it's the creation, it's the institution, if you will, of what is known today in the church as the Eucharist or communion, or just simply the Lord's Supper. And so at the Last Supper, Jesus pours out himself. He hosts the Passover meal with his disciples and maybe with others. And after the meal is over with, he takes this cup, which is usually called like the cup of redemption. And in the third cup of the Passover meal, he basically institutes communion, Eucharist, or the Lord's Supper, by saying, "This is my blood, the wine in the cup, and this is my body, the bread." And he says, "This is being poured out for you." What I think is beautiful among both of those, my friends, is that both in the feet washing and in the meal that's given, the Lord's Supper that's given, is that it's universal. Is that nobody gets excluded, even though Jesus has identified Judas, you might have heard of him, Judas Iscariot, Judas as a betrayer of Jesus, and he's also identified Peter as a denier of Jesus. He has predicted Peter will deny Jesus 3 times that evening. And he's also predicted that everybody else will abandon him. So it's fascinating that Jesus, who has identified a betrayer, a denier, and all of them are going to be abandoners. Yep, come and have your feet washed. And come and partake in my table. You know, so going back to Nebraska, I felt deeply unworthy when I wasn't actively thinking I might deny the person who invited me. Her name was Jennifer. And just imagine if, like, oh, I'm going to betray Jennifer tomorrow, but I'll enjoy her hospitality tonight. or I'll deny I ever even knew who Jennifer was at school on Monday, but I'm going to enjoy her hospitality tonight. I mean, I cannot imagine I can't imagine what kind of emotions might be going on inside of me if I did that. And then what kind of person am I to do that as well? I mean, but I felt deeply unworthy without those thoughts in my head. I wonder if somebody had told me, hey, by the way, you'll be denying Jennifer's presence at school when you go back on Monday. I'm like, no, that, and then I did. Or betrayed her in some way, or just simply abandoned her, said, oh, thanks for the hospitality, we don't ever need to talk again. I think it goes beyond guilt. I think it borders into shame. It borders into disgust. And the same thing. It's even worse if I put it in the Kenyan context. People who didn't have money, didn't have a lot of means, had limited resources. And if I was brought into that, and they brought me into it knowing I would betray them, actively knowing that I would deny them at some point, or just simply abandon them completely, never want to talk to them ever again. It's almost too much to allow yourself even to think about. And yet this is what Jesus is actively doing. He's actively identifying, Judas, you're going to betray me. Peter, you're going to deny me. And all y'all are going to just abandon me, walk away from me. In my actually deepest hour of need, you're going to walk away from me. And yet, give me those feet. Let me wash them. Here, take and eat, take and drink. Here's my meal. My cup, my very bread. Please take it. And there's just something deeply beautiful about that. But I think this is one of those great examples of what mercy looks like outside of the cross. We can talk about the cross. We should talk about the cross. And yet this moment of handing Judas or handing Peter or washing Judas's feet or washing Peter's feet, specifically those two, and understanding what's going on inside of them, the deep tension of mercy right alongside their brokenness, their sort of messed upness. Here's great generosity pushed up right against great selfishness, or great compassion pressed up against great arrogance or pride. And it just, how do you function as a human being that is being told this is what this meal is all about, this is what this Maundy Thursday is all about? How do you function? Because again, I didn't feel worthy when I was at Jennifer's house in Nebraska. I didn't feel worthy when I was at Pastor Kefa's house in Kenya, in Africa. How am I supposed to feel when I'm at Jesus's space, Jesus's table, having my feet washed, having the meal prepared for me, and I know I will deeply, not just disappoint what Jesus would have me do, but I will not love my neighbor perfectly, not even close. Let me say it in more bold ways. I will not love my neighbor at times. I will not love myself at times. I will not love God at times. And yet, welcome. Let me wash your feet. Let me pour out the wine. Let me break the bread so you can have. And I think there's this beautiful space of this is where love resides. Because love pours out and it says, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I did what love compelled me to do. And this is I think the beautiful part of why Jesus had to say what he said about the new command I give to you, love one another. He said, love compels God, love compels the Son, aka Jesus, and now love compels the church that represents them both. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus, the Holy Spirit is bound up absolutely by the compulsion of love. And we want to sort of logically work it out. We would rather lean toward logic. At least I would. I would rather lean toward logic. This makes sense because we're going to do X, Y, and Z for them, and so this makes all the sense. And we like this equality part. And equality is not a bad thing at all, but I think there's also this, we'll never have this equality with Jesus in these spaces. It will just pour out. It will just happen. And then the real question is, what do we do with it? I think the real question is like, it's ours. The feet washing to this day, Jesus does for each and every one of us. The pouring out happens every time you go to the communion rail or Eucharist, or every time you get an unexpected just blessing in your life. That's the communion rail as far as I'm concerned. But then what do you do with it? Because there's sometimes like, well, I can't be equal with Jesus, so I'll love can inform me in God's world, but love's not going to inform me in other people's worlds, because that's too dangerous. That is so dangerous to just let love inform my relationship with other people. And I think that there's a certain truth to that. I think letting only love dictate our relationship with other people may be naive. And yet, I think absolutely Jesus is very clear. The center of his desire for how we treat one another, how we treat ourselves, can't get around it. Extend the table. Extend the foot washing. Extend the communion rail, the Lord's Supper, and go in love. And every time that doesn't work out, every time you don't love, whether your neighbor, yourself, or God, come back to the rail. Come back to the place where Jesus will wash our feet, or be reminded of how Jesus still washes our feet. And so I think the commandment is kind of a circle in many ways. And yet, so many times we go out and start treating the world just through logic and through rationality only, and forget to center it around love. So then we start approaching God. I think it has a reciprocal effect on us. And so I think that's why this is important. I think this is why it's so important to be reminded of this before we go into Good Friday or Easter, because it's like, yeah, none of this is going to be deserved. We're never going to be worthy enough to receive the feet washing, or the bread and the wine, the hospitality, the vulnerable, loving space that Jesus provides for us. Like, there's never going to be there. And yet, that should not breed shame. It really shouldn't. It should breed love. It should produce love. It should overwhelm us with that hospitality, with that vulnerability, with that love that Jesus provides, and hear the command, the new command that Jesus gives to us that is old. Love. Just as I have loved you, so love one another. But are we willing to lean into either? I think Maundy Thursday asks us that question. Are you willing to lean into him? Are you willing to lean into a love that you know you're not worthy of and can never pay back? And then are you willing to lean into that love with your relationships, with others, with yourself, and with God? My dear friends, my prayer, my hope on this Maundy Thursday is that you do lean into that love that is provided, is poured out upon our feet, into our hands with the bread and the wine that Jesus does provide. And I do pray and I do hope that we lean into that love for others. We're not going to do it perfectly, but we can do it. We can lean into that love. We can lean into that compassion and vulnerability, that hospitality, because of what Jesus has done for us. That is my hope. That is my prayer. That love leads us all, my friends. Amen. All right, thank you for joining me, my friends, for this special Maundy Thursday Common Communion. I'll be trying to do a special Good Friday one as well. And I don't know about an Easter. I might do an Easter Monday one. We'll see. We might put one out on Easter. But We'll see about that. But hope you guys are doing good. Really are. And I'm praying that each of you have a blessed Maundy Thursday or Good Friday or whatever day you happen to be listening this on, and that you constantly are reminded of how much you are loved, and now how much you get to love because of that love that Jesus gave to us. All right, my friends, stay safe out there. Stay grounded in that love that God gives us, and I will see you next time here on The Common Communion. Bye, my friends.